The UK Armed Forces Minister Al Carns has warned very openly that Britain must be ready for war within 3 to 5 years. He made that comment on the Times, the General and the Journalist podcast.
3 to 5 years for a geographically constrained conflict in some way, shape or form. And every time we've tried to guess it, we get it wrong. The reality is we need to be ready. And my belief at the moment is the military is fit to fight. I think we need to rapidly adopt the lessons from Ukraine and make sure that, for example, the army is equipped with the most capable drones and integrated systems to fight. Warfare isn't just about hardware, it's about resilience.
The minister was also very clear he wanted to see a faster increase in defence spending in line with other European allies, spending up to 3% of national earnings by 2029 in this Parliament.
I would back it. I mean, in the Munich Security Conference, he sort of alluded to it. What I want to do is make sure that money is spent in the right place to make sure that we have the right capability for our soldiers, sailors and airmen as we move forward. I think on the international space, watch Germany. I've spoken to my German counterparts, my Norwegian counterparts, my French counterparts. The Germans are off. And because they're, I wouldn't say starting at a low base, because they have quite a blank canvas, they're adopting some of this new type of warfare at a different level.
That's the Armed Forces Minister Al Carns there. Now, earlier this week I sat down with the Defence Secretary John Healey to mark the 4-year anniversary of the invasion of Ukraine, and I asked him if he shared the hope of some, which we now know includes his own fellow minister, that the target of spending 3% of national earnings on defence could be reached in the Parliament. And he rather stonewalled that question.
Well, first of all, our commitment is 3.5% on defence by 2035. That was something we signed up to last summer alongside all other 31 NATO nations, including the US. That is a strong signal to Russia and any other adversaries that you have a determination in NATO that is bigger, is stronger, is better funded. As Keir Starmer has said recently, hard power is the currency of this age. Defence is the central organising principle of this government.
You could call that the Defence Secretary playing a very straight bat, maybe as you might expect. Larisa Brown is the Defence Editor at The Times. Hi to you, Larisa.
Hi, John.
Hi, no great surprise to hear the Defence Secretary, as it were, giving it the dead bat when it comes to this question of future spending on defence, which makes it all the more striking, doesn't it, Larisa, to hear the position put so bluntly by a serving Defence Minister?
It does. I was quite surprised by Al Carns' remarks. I mean, for him to say effectively or to suggest that he thinks we should be spending 3% by 2029 is quite a big deal. And it doesn't surprise me that he thinks that, because he, as we know, was serving in the Special Forces. He knows exactly what the reality British soldiers could face in the future. And we should take him at his word. And what I found quite interesting is you interviewed the Estonian ambassador yesterday, and he was urging the UK to be spending 3% by 2029. And he did make me smile at a conference earlier in the day, because he told us that Russia might not wait until NATO is ready to face it.
Yes.
And that's quite a an important point, isn't it?
It is. And it's also interesting, Larisa, to hear Al Carns say that actually Keir Starmer also wants to accelerate defence spending in the same way, because you've got Downing Street very wary of turning the Prime Minister's vaguer talk of doing more and doing it more quickly into concrete commitments.
Yeah, I don't. When you speak to Downing Street, they are sort of pushing back. They haven't made any commitments to bringing forward that timeline. Rachel Reeves is obviously said to be hesitant. We don't know exactly what her position is on it at the moment. And it's going to cost an awful lot of money if they are going to do this. But I was speaking to Sharon Graham, the General Secretary of Unite, yesterday, and she was saying that thousands of jobs currently are at risk because we haven't even got the Defence Investment Plan, which we've been waiting for months, and that's going to set out exactly what projects are going to be approved and where the money is going. And I think that the fact that we're still waiting for that is a suggestion that there is this wrangling going on over the defence spending, and there might be a decision on it soon.
All right, Larisa Brown, Defence Editor at The Times. Great to talk to you as always. Now, before the show, I caught up with Edward Lucas, the Times columnist, who's written in The Times on how the UK has wasted years of time while the threat continues and continues to grow. He told me the West, well, needs to get busy now. Edward Lucas, thanks so much for joining me on the programme today. Really powerful column in the Times. Just tell us the thrust of what you're writing about the way that we're wasting time in the face of a clear threat.
The world has become a lot more dangerous, particularly for Britain, since the full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022. And the Ukrainians, by resisting very fiercely, have bought us a lot of time. In fact, they bought us 4 years. And during that period, some countries have responded admirably. So we've seen countries, particularly next to Russia, rearming fast and doing all sorts of other things they need to do. And we basically haven't. And we are still waiting for a defence investment plan, which was due in the summer. And while we dither, Ukrainians are dying and suffering. And our security is becoming more and more fragile. And I feel both very worried about this and actually quite cross.
And if we look at the Russian side, even while Russia has been expending strength in the war in Ukraine, it's built strength at the same time, you write, and Russia's learned painful lessons from the Ukraine war.
This has been one of the big surprises, that Russia was extremely badly prepared for this war, which Putin launched quite recklessly, and they suffered terrible damage at the beginning, and people began to think rather unwisely that the Russian armed forces were a bit of a joke. And it's true, they do things that are shockingly brutal and wasteful and incompetent, but they've also modernized, and particularly when it comes to drone warfare, the use of missiles, the electronic warfare, jamming the Ukrainian drones and conducting other sorts of disruption. They've moved ahead very quickly. So the Ukrainians still have a bit of an edge on some things, the Russians a bit on another. But what is absolutely clear is we are lagging behind. And we have, for example, effectively no air defences in this country. We rely entirely on our NATO allies to intercept anything heading our way before it gets here. I think that's a very rash assumption to make that that's going to work.
Yes, and if we look at Britain's response to this threat, you make the point, and I was talking just the other day to the Estonian ambassador. Estonia is just one example of a NATO member in Europe, which is building its military strength. It's scaling up its proportion of national spending on defence really considerably, and that's a real contrast with a country like Britain, where you say, look, the Britain has talked a good game, but just not backed up the rhetoric with tough decisions.
Yes, I refer to this as the say-do gap, that we talk a lot and we're brilliant at doing PowerPoint slides and giving speeches and, as some of our top defence people say, framing the problem. So we have maybe quite impressive skills when it comes to talking or even thinking, but not when it comes to doing. And one of the striking statistics is that the Finnish armed forces, and that's a country of 5 million people and about a 5 billion defence budget, have more combat power than the British Army does. They spend their money wisely, and we spend ours very unwisely, as well as not spending nearly enough of it. But I'm very keen that we should not just spend more money on defence, but we should spend it better, because there's no point in throwing money into a system that's basically broken.
And what about the vulnerability of the United Kingdom? I mean, you quote General Sir Rowley Walker. He's a high-ranking commander in the British Army, and you make the point that Britain may be more vulnerable than a country like Finland or Poland on the borders, the land border of Russia. And the general warns of maybe large-scale combat operations, as he puts it, as early as next year. What do you take that to mean? What does large-scale combat operations mean where Britain's concerned?
Well, I think you have to look both at what's on the tin and what's in the tin. And this is a very stark warning from General Walker, who's the head of the army. And that was a very senior position, as you say. He's writing in the Daily Mail, and he's saying that we could face large-scale combat operations, which means large numbers of troops and equipment, not the sort of pinprick operations that we've with our special forces in Ukraine and things like that. And we're not ready for that. We have no reserves, effectively, in the British Army. We have no second echelon. We have some excellent weapons, but once they run out of munitions or get destroyed in the first week of the war, what then? So we're not ready. What worries me a bit is I feel that the all three wings of the armed services are fighting for money by doom-mongering in public. And to some extent, that's bad for NATO. So I dislike it when they brief that if we have to deploy in Ukraine for to police some kind of ceasefire deal there, we would have to leave, take our 1,000 troops out of Estonia. And that sends a very bad signal to Putin. So I think that the generals should, although it's very useful for you and me to see the generals complaining publicly, it'd be even better if they complain privately.
Well, we have heard, haven't we, occasionally generals, serving generals, and more often former generals warning about this threat and the need to prepare much more robustly for it. But it was so interesting, wasn't it, Edward, to hear Al Carns, the Armed Forces Minister, a member of the government, echoing these warnings in that general and the journalist podcast. You do not expect necessarily to hear this articulated that boldly by a serving minister. I mean, what do you make of that? What do you make of the significance of that?
It's very hard to work out what is going on here, because Al Carns is both a very loyal member of the government and he's very well versed both in the threat from Russia, because he's, I believe, served in Ukraine in some capacity, and he also knows the weakness of the Army and Navy and Air Force and all the rest of it very, very clearly. So he's speaking very bluntly, and it could be a kind of do what I want or I'll resign. I mean, it could be laying down a marker for that. But in the end, I just think we're talking about the wrong thing here. We're sort of, who's up, who's down in the MOD or the armed services. The actual point is that the war is going on right now, not just in kinetic terms in Ukraine, but this constant barrage of dizzying sub-threshold attacks, whether it's sabotage or propaganda, the use of the legal system, the shadow fleet exporting Russian oil. All this stuff is going on right now, and we don't have an answer to it. Countries in the front line do, the sort of the Finns and the Estonians and Lithuanians and so on. They've got a very good handle on it, but we don't. And so I think rather than worrying, are we ready for a future war, we should be particularly concentrating on why we are failing to deter Russia in the conflict that's happening right now. We've really left it too late, I think, to get the sort of full defences we need. That's going to be 10 years at 5% of GDP, and even then there would be holes. So I think that the accent now should really be on deterrence. What can we do to make Putin really scared of attacking us? Because that can plug the gap in the short term, and we can worry about the long term later.
I was speaking to me just a little earlier. Now, hello and welcome to the programme, General Sir Richard Sheriff, the former NATO Deputy Supreme Allied Commander for Europe. General, good to have you here.
Thank you very much, John. Good to be with you.
Now, your thoughts, General. Interesting, isn't it, to hear a serving defence minister speak in this way? Not something you hear every day, but I guess the really interesting thing is whether it turns out to be significant, whether it changes things.
That's right. And everything that Edward Lucas said, I 100% agree with, particularly that we are effectively in a war at the moment. It's a covert war. It's a war below the threshold of conventional war. And the paramount requirement is to deter war. And the only way you deter war is by being ready for it. This is not about being prepared, wanting in any way to go to war. But it's not crying wolf. The reality is the wolf is firmly at the gate.
Yes. I mean, look, you follow these matters very, very closely. Do you expect to see the Starmer government rise to the challenge that's now being set down?
Well, you're asking a soldier a political question.
Yeah.
On current and recent form, the answer to that is no. And I just highlight, I mean, that phrase of Edwards, the say-do gap is getting wider and wider. And every time there's been the slightest hint of an increase in defence spending at a faster rate than the one laid down, Labour backbenchers start howling with horror. The Chancellor says no. And this is going to require somebody in government, the Prime Minister, frankly, to get a grip.
And the British public, then? the scaling up of defence spending, the rearmament on the scale which it is suggested is needed, it will require the British public to accept and to embrace sacrifices in public services, in spending, in areas that people take for granted, and more. Do you think the British public will go in that direction, will rise to that?
Well, it's a case of educating and informing in a very sober, calm way the realities of the situation. It's also about recognizing that it's not just about public spending. There are legions of ways of harnessing innovative private investment in order to do what needs to be done in the defence budget. But I fear that the system is so sclerotic that it can't even look for those innovative and is ready to look for those innovative ways. But fundamentally, if you're talking about public spending, yes, it's a zero-sum game. You either spend your money on welfare or the National Health Service, or you put it in defence. And I would say it's not a question of, as people say rather glibly, warfare or welfare. It's a case of defence or real or nothing, because everything depends on ensuring we're properly defended. Without proper defence, there's no welfare, there's no National Health Service, there's no education. So defence, and it's a cliche that's trotted out again and again, is the first responsibility of government. And they must put their mouth where their mouth is, their money where their mouth is now.
General Sir Richard Sheriff, really good to talk to you. Thank you. Now, coming up,